I think there's no one coming in, but Lauren, if you just keep an eye on the waiting room. Great. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome. We are already halfway through this year's Southwest Marine Ecosystems webinar series. We've had 5 already: plastics, cetaceans, marine protected areas, seashore and seabed, and water quality. And if you've missed any of those, you can catch up on the Southwest Marine Ecosystems YouTube channel. Tonight will be recorded as well, so if you don't want to be in the recording, please do switch your videos off. You shouldn't be able to unmute yourselves now, but if you do have a question at all, please pop it in the chat, or you can raise your hand and we can unmute you for questions at the end. So we've got 4 more webinars to come, which are marine planning, fish and reptiles, fisheries, and marine and coastal birds. I've put the whole programme in the chat. But tonight is all about seals, and very apt as it's actually International Seal Day today. So we've got 5 talks from 4 fabulous speakers. They'll all be 15-20 minutes each-ish. And as I said, we'll have some time for questions at the end of all tonight's sessions. So if you do have any questions, please pop them in the chat or raise your hand and we can come to you at the end and unmute you. So I'll pass over to Sue first, who's going to give us a Southwest summary and empowering volunteers talk. Over to you, Sue.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Helen. That's great. I'm hoping now that you can see my presentation. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's a whistle-stop tour around the Southwest tonight with all the sorts of things that we've been working on in 2022. Always have to say thank you to our funders, many of whom are private businesses and charities, which is great. Our story began in 2000 and yeah, we've just updated our timeline for 2023, which is exciting. We have 1.3 full-time rangers with Lauren and Sarah, who are utterly amazing. And I'm delighted to say that Kate Williams on the right-hand side was a runner-up for the Marine Award from the National Biodiversity Network. So we were delighted about that. And thanks to the Wildlife Trust for nominating her. And we hosted one of our patrons' visits this year, which was lovely. As ever, our work is fundamentally underpinned by the philosophy of sharing our seas, but when we're doing things in the sea and the coastal environment, we want to mitigate impacts as much as possible. This is hot off the press, only did this yesterday. This is our 2022 summary. Basically, we did slightly less surveys, but we still managed 13 a day, every day of the year. We had data from 263 volunteers across 362 locations, processed over 120,000 photos, over 12,000 IDs, but we got a maximum of this big jump up, 160 IDs in a single survey, which is going some. There were 6 seals that were first seen in 2000, still around in 2022, plus another 4 from 2001, but 4 of the seals from 2000 are still going in 2023, which is wonderful. We still had a lot of unique entangled animals and we still had a lot of disturbance, but more of that later. And I'm delighted to say that we had plenty of data. 181 unique tag seals were seen. But despite the fact that we've downsized our team, we still managed shed loads of activities and doubled our beneficiaries who are hearing about seal messaging. We still did a talk a week, a workshop every fortnight, got loads of reports out, and now we have a volunteer running our stalls and events. It's working really well. So thanks to that team. As ever, it's all about partnership. I'm not going through all of these, but look at all these partners that we actually work with. Local governing bodies have been a new one. National governing bodies have been a new one that we've been working with. And what a fantastic Southwest team effort we have with all these organisations doing the joined up stuff. Why do we need seals to thrive? Well, they're limited by prey availability. So without food, they die. Thriving seals means we have a thriving habitat with thriving fish and thriving fisheries because they're performing an essential top predator role to help the ecosystem. We know we need healthy oceans in order to sustain ourselves, really important for planetary resilience. They contribute to economic prosperity because whilst you can't predict where a dolphin will be as easily, you can certainly predict where seals will be. They make us smile, they're good for our health and well-being, so they support Cornish triple bottom line. We've continued to work on a Seal Alliance campaign to change the law to make disturbance illegal. All of these steps have happened over the last couple of years. We're still waiting for seals to be added to the Wildlife and Countryside Act, but there were 300 species to add, and every single one wants an assessment. So it is going to take a long time. However, the Marine and Coastal Wildlife Code from DEFRA, which will be a single hymn sheet for us to talk about best practice across England and Wales, due out at the start of April. Very excited about that. One of the biggest initiatives in 2022 is the launch of Operation Seabird by the police and the Marine Management Organisation across the southwest, which is really fantastic. So we had a lovely launch day, and it's got action days for 2023 that you'll be able to participate in. We're just waiting for the locations. As you know, we have really clear definitions of what disturbance is, and most of our work focuses on the serious level disturbance, level 3, where seals leave the land and go into the sea. And Operation Seabird is about raising awareness to mitigate disturbance so that people know what to do and how to avoid disturbing them. So that's the plan. I'm not expecting you to look at these graphs in any detail, but I'm just saying that our data is really useful on a monthly basis, because we've got events at the top, disturbance events, and we've got the numbers of seals impacted. And you can see that June, July and August in the last few years are when most of the disturbance events happen. But Easter, i.e. April often, and then winter are when we get most of our seals disturbed. So if we look at that on a kind of year-on-year graph on the left, events at the top and seals disturbed at the bottom, if we ignore 2019 and 2021, when we had an increased survey effort for disturbance, you can see that we're still getting increased disturbance events, and there's still a fairly upward trend in numbers of seals disturbed. We get most disturbance events in the summer when there are more people about. However, we get a lot of seals disturbed in the winter when there are a lot of seals around, and then those events mean that actually we get quite a lot of seals disturbed all year round. It's really busy around our coast, isn't it? So this is a sensitive seal site. We have one activity every 5.5 minutes. It's super busy, peak season. And then this is another familiar site that one of you will recognise very well, you know, one every 2 minutes for paddle sports, and also some powered craft as well. So our coast is very busy. In 2022, we took it upon ourselves to write letters to the operators and to try and positively engage them. So we sent out 4 letters. We developed this graphic to show that actually these are the impacts of seals: interrupting rest, panic and injury, and that most of these impacts are actually invisible and delayed. So you can see this juvenile tombstoning and it will swim away. But what you can't see is that it's cracked its rib or it's broken its bottom jaw, and that will have a delayed impact and make it die a few months later. So this is the message we're communicating. Disturbance impacts are often invisible and delayed. And we've asked people to start risk assessing for seals. Very simple. It's just like a human risk assessment, but there's only one line really to remember, and that is high up is high risk. This seal, if it's disturbed off here, is going to have a life-threatening injury, most likely. So for disturbance, key message is point the finger at yourself. When you do that, if you're on the coast path, if you're looking from a safe distance, you've not accessed a beach where seals are, you're 100 metres away on water, point the finger at yourself. And if you say, did I do all those things? And the answer is yes, problem goes away tomorrow. So it's really important. We're continuing to work on entanglement, but I'm not going to talk very much about that tonight, but we are still work in progress with that. But here are the seals that inspire us. So this is Chairlift. I always talk about him. First seal I ever ID'd. He's still around in 2022, and so was Hook, but he hasn't been seen since June, and I fear that Hook might be no more. And Ghost, bless her, after an erroneous pup deposit on the Lizard in 2021, where we think she got caught short, she was back at her usual site to pup in 2022. It was her 19th pup in 20 years. We got its fur pattern, so we'll be able to track it for life, which is great. And I know you've seen this story before if you've heard a talk from us. Lucky Bunting, who Dan and I was successfully rescued back in 2016. She had her 3rd pup in 3 years in 2022. So yay, it's so exciting. Roseland had a really interesting visitor both in 2021 and 2022. This is a seal rescue island seal who was released here on the southeast Irish coast and has been seen around here on the south coast. It's not the first seal rescue island seal that we've had in Cornwall, but it is the first on the south coast, so that's really exciting. And then we've had 2 repeat visitors, well, certainly this one's a repeat visitor from France. So this is an Oceanopolis released seal, Christine, who came over to the north coast. And this special seal with 75 bleached on her side temporarily until she molts, this one is our longest distance swimmer that we're aware of. She swam 800 kilometres from her release down here in Biarritz in southern France, and she did that 800 kilometres in less than 28 days. Wow, amazing. I'm delighted to say that the wonderful volunteer Joyce Williams has written up 6 post-release monitoring story case studies, and if you would like access to them, all you need to do is email us seals@cornwallsealgroup.co.uk. Okay, so all this slide is to tell you is that when we drew calendars for seals, they're all different. So every seal is unique, just like every human, and that's a message that we really want people to understand. So we've added Biarritz to the map, but other than that, not an awful lot has changed. Seals are just really well travelled. But this is hot off the press, and we're just writing a commissioned report for Natural England, and the left-hand map, it's not really a map, it's kind of just a connections drawing or graphic, shows how interconnected all our seal habitat is. However, the software has suggested, and this is work in progress, so don't quote me on this yet, but it looks like there might be 3 communities who are better connected within than beyond. A North Coast community of seals, a Land's End community of seals, and a South Coast community of seals. That's very exciting, so we'll work on that and get back to you. We know that more seals than ever are dying in Cornwall, thanks to the wonderful Cornwall Wildlife Trust Marine Strandings Network, but we had 291 dead seals in Cornwall, and the research that the analysis I just did for the Marine Strandings Network suggests that we've got quite a lot of under 15-year-olds dying, particularly under 10-year-olds of males, and James will talk more about that later. And James could also, he did a post-mortem on this animal. Dan has seen a lot more unresponsive seals, you know, really lights are on, no one's home kind of thing with British Divers Marine Life Rescue that they've had to respond to. And James's post-mortem suggests that this may, but only may, be associated with some sort of live bycatch process going on. Very interesting, but she was a wonderful case study, was Blackwall, because we could see her wound progression from no wound right the way through to an open wound, to a healing wound, and to a healed wound. So it was really interesting to be able to see that. So to sum up issues then, climate change is a big one. I'm going to talk about that more later. Prey availability, always key. Pollution, we know we've got lots of that in all different forms. Habitat loss, persecution, there's less of that, fortunately, we hope. Bycatch and entanglement, and disturbance, which I've mentioned. Right, quick run around the southwest. This really is whistle stop, okay? Basically, a wonderful match between Skoma and North Devon, really fantastic. Gower, Gareth Richards' photo, I love this photo. It's just lots of pregnant females looking absolutely stunningly beautiful. Don't they look chilled out? That's how seals should look when we're not about. They just sleep, and when we're about, they should look the same, sleeping. North Devon, Lundy. So Kate has been identifying some of the seals from Lundy. Rob did a visit and a talk as part of their marine festival, and the public have been sending in some photos as well, and Kate managed to identify these 2 from North Devon. North Devon mainland, I always love the photos from Dave Jenkins, and I love the fact that Kate Williams can usually identify all of them. I wish I was that good. And these ones, this was interesting because it's a female who was first seen in 2019, then again in later on in 2019, but this is the first re-ID since then. Where's she been all that time? North Cornwall. Louise had the survey from Mike in July, and there was this seal there. It's only its 3rd sighting since 2017. Whereas this one on the same survey, it's the 1st sighting since 2017. That's 5 years ago. Where has she been in 5 years? A regular has returned to Trevose, ID'd by Jules, which is great. Pentire. I'm going to read this one out because this is a bit sad. This is a bittersweet picture on the left. Our old friend with the blue plastic loop is probably a flying ring around his neck, jockeying for position with an as yet unidentified young taggy. A seal whose life has been saved by human intervention with another whose life has been destroyed by human carelessness and flying rings. Very empathetic, Andy, and a lovely tribute to Commuter. However, just because he's got a flying ring round his head hasn't stopped him flirting with a female, bless him. And he's called Commuter because he commutes up and down the north coast between Pentire and West Cornwall. Had a new volunteer, Emma, who had some success at doing some IDs from the Newquay area. And this seal here has got a really interesting calendar. Where on earth does she go in the summer? I just feel like we've been doing this for a long time and there are still more questions than answers. How does that work? Newquay again. So this is Radley, who got hooked. She was hooked in the start of June. She'd been hooked a few years ago. And then the following day, Emma went out and spent 45 minutes watching her and got this photo of her along with lots of other wonderful ones. She was oblivious to Emma being sat there because she sat quietly and zoomed in with her camera. But you can see her nose is completely dry. She looks like she's got a mask because she's been bottling in the same place, sleeping peacefully in the same place for so long. But the best thing, she'd lost her hook. Thank goodness for that. Porthtowan, an ex-rehab seal, returned to Beachmaster again. I think you can see he's doing the business there. Portreath, I was pleased about this one. Running tap, I hadn't seen her for a long time, probably since 2019, but she has been at West Cornwall and then was seen at West Penwith North. West Cornwall, my site, like everywhere, we've seen lots of really sad. This was a dead or dying gannet. I think it was actually dying, very sad. On the positive side, this female has had 7 pups now, 7 pups at 3 different sites, but we haven't seen her for 2 years. Why is that? And then suddenly she reappears with another pup at West Cornwall East, but she's also had pups at North Cornwall, and she's even been round to Loo, but she had her other pup here just west. Snowdrop is a beautiful female ex-taggy who has had pups in Wales and Cornwall. And I was pleased about this because I hadn't seen this seal since 2020. She's a regular on the Lizard and suddenly reappeared at West Cornwall. St Ives Bay, they managed to successfully wean this beautiful day-old pup into this fat chonk called Maverick. Wings is another female who's had pups in Cornwall and Wales. Round to West Penwith North, another seal who, you know, the visit calendar's just changed a lot, disappeared off the radar in 2020, only 1 sighting 2021, suddenly appeared for the first time at West Penwith North. There seems to be a lot of change going on. I was chuffed to bits about this photo, member of the public, first photo he'd ever sent us, and we were able to ID him. We've got a better photo than this to ID him, but I love this photo of him snorting and snorkeling. Basically, he's defected completely to the south coast, except for occasional visits up to North Devon. And then lovely, Nicola got some photos from distance of 3 beautiful females on Mounts Bay West. Lizard, well, this is a great story. Yogi, basically, he leaves the Lizard between the 17th and the 27th of August, and he goes to the north coast to Porthtowan, where he arrives between the 21st of the 8th every year and something like the 21st of September. And then he returns to the Lizard in October. It's such a regular pattern, and it just shows that there are driven things that are going on within these animals' instincts to keep moving in particular ways. And then this was really my story of the year, apart from Ghost, who had a 19th pup in 20 years. But this is Key. Now, Key's been identified over 1,000 times and only at the Lizard. And then between the 5th and the 21st of January, out of the blue, she turned up at West Cornwall and I recognised her straight away. So she's come on her holiday to West Cornwall for a couple of weeks and then she headed straight back to the Lizard. And then it just turns out that Enid, who's one of the key volunteers down there, said, well, I told her to come and see you to tell us, say, congratulations for getting your MBE. Don't you love seals? Obviously, that's a little bit anthropomorphic of me. Roseland. Okay, so unfortunately, we think we've said goodbye to Ellis, who is a seriously infected common seal, bless him. He wasn't looking too good in the last sighting we had of him. His infection had tracked down through gravity to either side of his flippers. So we think he's gone, bless him. Kirsten is fabulous at tracking seal photos between the old photos and the new. So this is 2016 for Throat You Overleddy, and this is him in 2022. He's looking quite grown up, isn't he? So she does a great job at that. St Austell Bay, we had good numbers of seals, including this one from Lou, who's got a scar on his back, and they had pups again this year. Fat chonk, skinny mom look, hip sticking out. In Lou, there was a talk done for the Lou Marine Conservation Group, and we'd updated the calendars. Each one is different for each of the different seals there. And this beautiful seal, who's also got a dry nose from bottling so long, is Arrowhead, who features on a lot of our t-shirts because Holly did a lino print of him. He's a spectacular male, isn't he? I love all that fluffy stuff on his nose. And then round to South Devon, this is an interesting story of an ex-taggy. This seal was actually rescued in Scotland and then released on the west coast of Scotland. And then he appeared outside a pub in Bristol. Okay, they're not really supposed to do that, but clearly Nacho, the common seal, hadn't heard that. He was rehabbed at West Hatch and then released in Dorset because it was close to West Hatch, but it was a place where there were common seals. So it was released to be amongst common seals. And this is Nacho on the Tamar, looking bald as anything, got no fur, but hopefully it will regrow. And then Sarah sent this from Dorset. This is a haul out that now seems to be used regularly over the last few years. And she was able to re-ID all the seals who had previously been identified in Dorset. And then finally, the Solent seal. Kate Williams is a genius ID, and she managed to identify this seal as a re-ID in Solent, which is great. Okay, quickly then about empowering partners and volunteers. Basically, it's about talking to each other, sharing information and resources. We gave seals a voice in 2022 in all these public consultations. That's really important, but it's a lot of work, and the more people who can help communicate messages for us, the better. So we've been engaging with governing or representative bodies and businesses to try and share our stories for us and our messaging for us. So this is British Canoeing, and this is the Cornish Gig Rowing Association, Dartmouth Harbour. These are the Seal Alliance signs still going up. And this is the Coast Path, and we've been working with the National Trust to help them spread the message about not having drones flying over National Trust land because it's not allowed. So trying to get all these other organisations who've helped us to share our information, because user groups like to hear it from their representative bodies better than they like to hear it from us. We've also been working with landowners and changed our emphasis in 2022 from managing seals to managing people around seals. So if there's a pup on a beach and all it needs to do is rest, the National Trust have been utterly amazing at getting all these fabulous signs up and out around the coast, asking people voluntarily to not access beaches where there are pups. And this one was a local user group on a beach, local stakeholder group, who put up a sign of their own, trying to keep a mum and pop safe. It's awesome that all of this is happening. It's such a great step forward. We were delighted with the Wildlife Trust and Lou Island, who've got these fantastic case studies of all the seals that they routinely see. So well done, Claire, for making that happen. And we were delighted with the landowner on the St Austell Bay area, because they've actually built Rob Wells a hide that he can survey from, so that members of the public can't see him stepping over fences to go and survey, and he can also survey in comfort out of the rain. How cool is that? We've got stickers that people can use for paddle sports. We're hoping to update those again this year, and the wonderful Lizard Hub even created their own booklet and stickers to sell for a minimum donation in Mungo Lills on the Hill, the shop there, to help promote their local seals and best practice. Working about flying rings is still something that we're doing. So Andrea Hunt and Vanessa Bottrell collected all these flying rings, bar two, off one beach in 2 years. You've seen this poster before. It's been a great success. So I can report that in 2022, Pets at Home and Tesco's have taken them off their shelves. CVS Vets, Gareth has managed to achieve this. The 600 practices, I think, nationally have removed them from their shelves. We haven't had a response from Crufts, but we'll work on that one. We haven't had a successful response from Cotswolds and Halfords. So if you feel like writing to them, get on with it, because they need a bit of pushing. Lots of coastal shops have taken flying rings off the shelves. Peter Perkins has been to all the vet practices in Cornwall and asked them to display flying rings posters, and most of them have been shocked because they didn't realise they were an issue and have been very positively engaged about it. And now he's going around dog grooming parlours, which is another great place to go. We're still doing boat surveys. If you are good on boats, it's worth going on one of these, because we see some particularly spectacular marine life around the coast, and the Lou survey continues. It started in 2008, it's going strong. We've been getting book writers to include responsible behaviour in their books, and we've got training. You will know we have free volunteer online training. There's no compulsion to volunteer afterwards. It's just for you to find out if it suits you. And in 2022, we had 2 Discovering UK Seal courses. And in 2023, we're going to have our first Seal Field Skills to Inform Conservation. So we're running up a group booking at the minute for the May Discovering UK Seals course, which is a week on biology, ecology, species ID and conservation, a week on each, 2 to 3 hours a week, and you study it yourself with a weekly Zoom session with me. And the new course will be surveying, recording, influencing decision making and photo IDing seals. So that's happening in August. But we also wrote a course for the Marine Network about ecology and conservation for not in education and training young people. So that's going ahead, which is great. And I've been doing school talks on Zoom, which I love. I've done it from year 1 to university and adults. So I do it for all age groups now, and it works really well. The youngsters get the puppets, although I'm sure the university students probably quite enjoy the puppets too. And we've been helping British Divers Marine Life Rescue train their interns in the field. Key thing where you can help us really is we're putting social media about best practice out routinely now. Every Friday and Saturday, our social media will be best practice, how you can watch seals responsibly, as well as the week before a school holiday. And we'll tackle different user groups, not pointing the finger at any just one. And then also showing people that this is what seals do when we're not there. They sleep. So if they're looking at you, they're doing it because you're there and they've been disturbed. We've got some great new graphics and cartoons that we're going to be promoting this year. And as ever, our Google Drives are now bursting full of free resources that you can access anytime you like. How on earth do we manage all of this? Well, we do it because we get funding from fundraising. Hayley runs Jumble Bee auctions for us. We've got £700 nearly in the one for our artwork. We've got a one-stop Sealy shop for online merchandise for everything you could want to do with seals, and our Wild Seal Supporter adoption pack and donations as well. That's 4 things. That's the 4 ways we're funding ourselves. And then just to finish, key messages for us all to share. The biggest threats to our planet are blue blindness, not thinking about the sea, denial, apathy, can't be bothered, and myths and misconceptions, like that seal came off the rock to come and say hello to me. No, it didn't. It came to check you out and check you're safe. And by that time, you've impacted it and had an effect on it. Nature sustains us. Our biggest mistake will be to prioritise ourselves over nature. Nature sustains us. Without it, we've got no food, drink or life. The planet doesn't need a plan B. People do. If we make space for nature, it moves in, and nature will help us if we help nature. But have we missed the point? I hear lots of people talking about this is about saving the environment. It's not about saving the environment. It's about saving ourselves. If we don't make a difference now, our young loved ones won't have a chance of a great life on a livable planet. That's why we need to take action for them. That's me done. I am going to stop sharing and I am going to hand over to Sarah. I'm sorry, I have taken 25 minutes, but my last talk will be 5 minutes slower. So thank you very much for listening. I hope whistle stop tour, loads of things for you to think about and hopefully successes for you to enjoy. Over to you, Sarah.
Okay. Hopefully that'll work. We good?
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so yeah, I'm Sarah from the Seal Project. We're Brixham based, so what I do is the monitoring of the seals around South Devon, and I got into this by chance several years ago. Came across a common seal, which is kind of in this as well, so it's quite all goes round and round. But we cover the South Devon coastline, kind of Dawlish, Tingmouth way down to even Start Point and that sort of way occasionally, but mostly Brixham based, Dartmouth, that kind of area, and we cover the River Dart. So and as Sue said in all that, knowing your seals and recognising them at different times is just fantastic. We don't get many pupping females in this area, but the few that we do, we know well. We know who they are and roughly when they're going to turn up and where. So they are creatures of habit, which is what we love to be able to kind of prove, I suppose. So again, like Sue says, certain seals turn up in certain places on certain dates. They have certain haul out sites, certain ways of hauling out. I mean, they're just fantastic creatures. And sometimes the knowledge of certain seals can be useful. This particular seal here has been known, recorded, I think, first in 2013. She looks like an entangled seal. She gets reported as a seal with rope around her neck to both BDMLR and to ourselves. But quite often, if we get a call to say there's a seal with rope around its neck and I know the location, we can pretty much prove by just somebody sending me a photo that actually it's this seal and she's okay. She's obviously a very lucky ex-entangled seal. So, and as you can see, a good, healthy looking adult, even despite the scarring she carries around the back of her neck. So this is kind of our normal seal survey view, very different to most other places of beautiful cliffs and rugged coastline. This is what our seals have behind them, a fishing port. And as you can see, the one seal that's actually sat up and looking a little more wary than others is not normally seen in this location. So therefore, probably wondering why everybody else is chilling out while boats are coming and going and horns are beeping and all the rest of it. But for whatever reason, the seals have discovered that they quite like to be in a busy fishing port. And you wouldn't think that would work well, but it does. But obviously the seals still have the same risks that they face: entanglement, abandonment for the pups during the pupping season, and hand feeding. We get a lot of anglers. The main issues aren't really with the fact that we're in a fishing port. It's more the fact that we've got a lot of anglers around and trying to persuade them not to fish over seals. You know, that can take some doing. But obviously we achieve a lot of what we do by talking to people, because we're out and about. We can kind of educate people just when we're walking around and when they're seeing the seals, because a lot of people come on holiday, they've never seen them. So it's raising awareness, education, and we do this with talks and different presentations in schools and clubs, which we love doing. Again, cuddly toys, you can show entanglement in a very visible but gentle way. And obviously social media and website. Ours needs a little bit of work, to be fair, but we do enjoy working with others. Seal Alliance, BDMLR, Operation Seabird. We're all aiming for the same thing. So, you know, we're all trying to protect the seals, protect the wildlife. And if we start with the youngsters, as we did in this particular event when we were at Devon County Show, they learn early. And I think that's where the message needs to kind of go from. But we also enjoy other events. We joined in with the Operation Seabird launch last year, and that engages a lot of other groups. And we hope through that way we can all help raise awareness to prevent more marine life disturbance, because we get a lot of jet skis, a lot of paddle boards, that sort of thing, kayaks. They all make a difference in different ways. And what one person thinks is not disturbance is to others. This particular seal we encountered a year ago on a survey. And I understand this is a banding from a gill net. So it's not just the gill net that's around this poor seal's neck, it's the banding from a weight, the weight that holds it down. And this seal, despite her injuries, travels quite a distance. She has been seen quite a lot by us. Unfortunately, the last sighting we have had was over Christmas. And we kind of, she even looked at me. That's the sad part. And I know seals aren't meant to look at you, but she was swimming towards me. And we can't do anything for her. She travels considerable distances. All the stars are where we know she's been seen, but where she is at the moment, we really don't know. But that's the trouble. They seem to survive some really horrific injuries, but then sometimes they're not so lucky. We just hope she appears somewhere at some point. So the good stuff, well, the data. We've been recording sightings since roughly 2017, which we share with the Seal Research Trust. It's very easy to get behind with these things because you just want to identify every seal. But we have done around 700 surveys. We've got quite a few more to catch up on. But just to recognise a seal from a survey is fantastic, because from each sighting, as with some of the data Sue's shown you, it adds to their life stories. They are all individuals, and this is what we think is fantastic. So we've got, in a small area, around 26 different places where the seals choose to haul out. And so therefore we're always trying to keep on top of where they are and who they are. So this would be kind of our normal view of our data recording when we're surveying in Brixton, because they lie flat. So we're not looking at them from above a cliff or anything like that. They are level with us. So as you can see in the back there, there's somebody laid there, no idea who that is. But this is how they relax, and they're getting quite good at it. So our difference with our location is we are on a man-made structure. The survey location rises and falls with the tides. I never quite understood the initial surveying around a high tide, because our tide didn't make any difference where we are, but clearly it does. But the location the seals haul out on it rises and falls with the tide, so they can snore their boots off. And the daft part is they do this in one of the country's largest fishing ports by market value. It's quite a small fishing port really, but they enjoy hanging out here. It's a busy tourist area as well, and it's not the only artificial site we survey, but it's the most important one. So this structure here, so this is the marina. We've got the lifeboat, we've got the fishing port, but the structure around the end, the little squares, is the wave screen, the man-made structure. And as you can see, some of the platforms have got white bits on the front. That's where the seals have rubbed it, sanded it off a bit with their leaping on and leaping off. But this is where they choose to sleep during the winter months. They don't do it in the summer, but they do it in the winter. And so at the far end, there's a little curve. That's where the ladies like to hang out. And at the end, the far end, nearest the path, there is a little haul out spot where one of the seals likes to watch the world go by. So on the whole, they sleep on the edge. They can jump into the water at any point, but this is kind of what we see on the whole, apart from when they're having a little moment. So from the pathway that the people can see, because nobody can actually access where these seals are, which is fantastic, so they're fully secure. Where the blue star is where, fingers crossed here, she is a seal well known, not only to us, but also known down in the Lizard. We think she might pup down there, but she doesn't pup up here. But that little haul out down the bottom, this girder, is her haul out spot of choice. She is seen here frequently. She doesn't really prefer anywhere else. The little yellow star at the bottom is Easter Bunny's haul out. I'll show you that one in a minute. So this is, fingers crossed, on one of her many, many turnouts. She always likes this spot. I suppose she can keep an eye on what's going on, but if anybody approaches her, she makes her feelings very clear. And Easter Bunny, he's been around for 3 years now, and this was how we first met him. Industrial plastic, we're in a major fishing port, there is a lot of litter, it's another one of the issues we deal with. But a week after this photo was taken, he reappeared in the same spot, minus the plastic. 3 years on, this was him a couple of days ago, nasty wound on his shoulder, but back in exactly the same spot, which is what I love, which is why we know, we can see the habits they form. And this was him 2 days ago. We can now say on this wave screen we've had a common seal haul out, because this little chap behind him is a common seal who is called Captain Caveman, and we've been seeing him for the last couple of months. So in the time in which I've been doing identifications, we have seen only 4 common seals in the area, in this particular area. So this is fantastic. But as per the previous picture, Easter Bunny is not sociable, particularly if he's in this little spot, he wants to be left alone. So a bit like Sue, she kind of beat me on her distances that the seals travel, but we have one of our seals is known to have been seen in Padstow. So it's gone from Brixham all the way around the Cornish coast up to North Cornwall. And then obviously we have some tag seals that have come from BDMLR rescues down in Cornwall and have been seen in Torbay. And we have had a tagged seal seen in Torbay that has also come from Oceanopolis in France. So they do all get about, which is fascinating. So it's quite interesting to see that they're all kind of sharing the areas. So 2 of the tag seals we see have actually been seen quite frequently over Christmas, hanging out with Easter Bunny, who is in that first picture. So the 3 of them are all in that picture, I think. Pippi Longstocking, she was released in March 2020. We've seen her in a few different locations. And SL130, Basil, he's been seen up here in Torbay a few times. And they were hanging out with Easter Bunny. So it proves Easter Bunny can be sociable. And again, they seem to have all disappeared. Easter Bunny rocking up a couple of days ago. So why is Brixham so important? Why am I telling you all this? Well, because we do the surveying and the data is recorded. In February this year, the wave screen, the artificial structure, of the wave screen to the Brixham Marina was given a county wildlife status by Devon Biodiversity Record Centre and Devon Wildlife Trust. This is fantastic. They've never given an artificial structure this kind of thing before. So it proves that all the surveying we've done, all the time we do this is so worth it. There's plenty of marinas in the country, but this is the only one, it seems, that is home to seals. And so there you go. So that structure is now a county wildlife site, but it gets better. The marina have been in contact with myself and Sue, because obviously the structure itself is wooden. They do an awful lot of maintenance to it over the years, but they know it is in need of replacement and redesign. And they have contacted us to say they want to replace the wave screen and also include the seals to make it good, if not better, for them. So we've been asked for our advice on how we think it should be kind of adapted to make sure that the seals can still use it. So we honestly really couldn't wish for more. It really makes the time and effort we put into recording the data and standing outside in the rain and everything else, it just makes it also worthwhile. Because a county wildlife site, I think it was a couple of years ago, I think the data was shared with the Devon Wildlife Trust. They're not legal sites, but it does give them a bit more protection. They're included, the county wildlife sites are included in local plans. So it means that they do have to take notice of it. And we don't have huge numbers of seals, but it means that the ones we have got are being kind of looked after really well. So hopefully in a couple of years, the wave screen will be new and revamped, and the seals will still love it. And it seems the marina are keen to make sure that that happens. So we can only say we are chuffed to bits with that. So on behalf of fingers crossed here and Easter Bunny and Captain Caveman and all the others, we think this is fantastic. So yeah, watch this space. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So our next speaker, we have James Barnett, who is veterinary pathologist down here in Cornwall, does most of the postmortems on the rescued seals and also seals stranded around the southwest coast. So over to you, James.
Thanks very much, Helen. And Sue's going to kindly forward my slides because I'm pretty hopeless at this. Thanks, Sue. So I want to give you a couple of examples of issues we've had with pollutants in grey seals around the Cornish coast. And one is a rather unique example of a consequence of a net entanglement that happened a few years ago, back in 2021 to be precise. And this was a very unusual presentation of an entanglement in terms of what happened to the seal and the knock-on consequences of the entanglement, which I think give another example of just how much this is an issue both for the welfare and conservation of grey seals around our coasts. So this grey seal was first seen in September 2018 and was identified on the north coast with this large monofilament net associated wound around its neck. And you can hopefully just about make out the monofilament net there in that top photograph. And thanks to the brilliant work of the Seal Research Trust, this animal was subsequently identified no less than 25 times over 2.5 years through photo identification records. And in fact, a few months after it was first seen, when some comparative work was done with some 12 to 18-month-old juveniles that were known to be going through their first annual molt, it was possible to estimate her age of being at least 2 years old. In April 2021, when she was probably around 4 years of age, she was found trapped between rocks and admitted for intensive rehab because she was in a very weakened physical state, and also because of this entanglement wound. And the net was subsequently removed and treatment started, but unfortunately her health deteriorated over the next few days and the decision was taken to euthanize her. Thanks, Sue. So the post-mortem findings were really interesting, and I apologise now that there are going to be one or two gory photos coming up just to warn you. She was light in weight. She only weighed 43.5 kilos, and her nose to hind flipper length was 146.5 centimetres, and that's quite a lot less than we'd expect in an animal this age, which is usually around 175 centimetres. She only had 1 millimetre of blubber over her sternum, and we usually see in excess of 2 to 3 centimetres in well conditioned seals. So you can see that she was very, very undernourished. And she had this large neck wound, which was showing signs of healing, despite the fact that the net had been there right up until the point of rescue. So moving on to the next slide. The most remarkable finding, though, and perhaps you'll be able to move a pointer around to illustrate it, is that the liver was massively enlarged on this seal. It weighed 9 kilos in weight, occupied most of the abdominal cavity, was very pale in colour, and was friable, which means that it broke up very easily when you touched it with your fingers. And that friability was there when the animal was alive, and it led to the liver essentially breaking up, rupturing on regular occasions and leading to bleeds, and there was hemorrhage occurring under the capsule of the liver, and also hemorrhage occurring into the abdominal cavity of the seal. And there was about 2 litres of blood found free in the abdominal cavity at the time of the post-mortem. But these ruptures were then healing, and you can see hopefully in the bottom right-hand picture, there's an area there of scarring where the liver has actually managed to heal itself despite this condition the animal was suffering from. So moving on. So looking at this under the microscope, what we see is total effacement. That means eradication of all the normal cell types found in the liver and replaced by this homogeneous pink substance. And you can probably make it out, hopefully in the bottom left-hand picture, this is a specific stain called Congo red, which stains up a substance called amyloid. And this was found throughout the liver and replaced, as I say, most of the normal cells within the liver. And proteomic analysis identified this as a particular type of amyloid called amyloid AA. So moving on. So what is amyloid and what is the condition of deposition of amyloid, which is known as amyloidosis? So this is a deposition of a very abnormal fibrillar protein in tissues, and AA amyloid is the most commonly found type of amyloid, and this has been found in all sorts of animals, including people. And it occurs, AA amyloid occurs specifically as a secondary condition to chronic inflammatory processes and infectious conditions. And of course, in this seal, we've got a very clear chronic inflammatory process, which is the entanglement leading to that chronic neck wound on the seal. So this amyloid deposition would account for the size and appearance of the liver and its tendency to bleed. And the fact that all the normal blood cells, all the normal liver cells have been replaced would have had a profound effect on that animal's liver function. And will explain why this animal was so underweight and so stunted, so shortened in size. So as a result of this, we found a new presentation or consequence of entanglement that's had a profound effect on this animal's life. Next slide, please, Sue. And can you just click again? Thanks. So we managed to get this published in the Journal of Comparative Pathology last year. So it's out there in the literature, scientific literature for everybody to read. I'd like to acknowledge my co-authors. Sue and Dan were both co-authors on this, along with Lizzie and Nat from British Divers Marine Life Rescue. And various people here who are additional authors were members of the National Amyloidosis Centre who did the work for us, and Mark Wessels, who's a pathologist. And of course, this work couldn't have been done without the amazing volunteers we have in the Cornwall Marine Pathology Team and also in the Cornwall Wildlife Trust and Marine Strategies Network and the Cornwall Seal Research Group, who do so much to enable us to further this work, both in terms of providing the ability to remove animals from the beach, bring them in for post-mortem, and to provide this excellent photographic identification work that was carried out on these animals. And then there's the various laboratories that supported us in our work. So that's the first case. So can you bring, thanks, Sue, that's brilliant. So the next bit I wanted to talk about was the effect of PCBs in seals and whether we should be concerned. Now, you probably know what PCBs are. These are substances that have been used for decades in industrial processes in this country and worldwide, and they're found in a variety of products, which I've listed there. They're environmentally persistent molecules that are toxic. They're highly lipophilic, which means that they are attracted to fat and absorbed by fat, and they bioaccumulate in the food chain, which means that as you go up the food chain, you get higher and higher levels. So potentially by the time you get to the apex predators, there are very high levels in these animals. Because of their toxic and environmentally persistent effects, these substances were banned in developed countries, and I've given the dates there as to when they were banned in the States and over here on this side of the Atlantic. But they've also still been produced, though, worldwide, and there are still large amounts present in landfills and also in various contaminated equipment that still requires elimination. And in 2015, a UN assessment of this estimated around 14 million tons of PCB contaminated equipment still requires elimination. And it's been found that the highest global exposure to PCBs occurs in marine mammals, particularly in toothed cetaceans. So moving on to the next slide. And PCBs are organochlorines, and they have toxic effects. They cause immunosuppression, which means they increase the susceptibility of affected animals to infectious disease. They cause reproductive impairment through reduced female fecundity and increased calf mortality. They're neurotoxins. They have an effect on the nervous system. They're carcinogenic, so they are cancer-causing, and they're teratogenic, which means that they have an effect on the unborn fetus. And this, it really just illustrates the process of biomagnification that occurs. So essentially, back in the days when we were still producing PCBs, they were running off into rivers, they were going up through atmospheric transport, through fumes coming out of plants producing PCBs, and then coming down again as precipitation and into our watercourses and our seas. And of course, since that time, they've been building up in landfill sites and leaching out into rivers again and back into our seas. And essentially, they're going up through the food chain from phytoplankton to zooplankton, then up through various fish, fish eating fish, marine mammals eating fish. So you can imagine that by the time you get to the top apex predators in the sea, then they've gone from several, very tiny, small amounts in the plankton right up to massive levels through biomagnification in our highest predators in the sea. And some research done in the early days in the UK focused particularly on levels in harbour porpoises, because this was the most abundant species that strands on our shore, and we have the greatest number of animals to look at in terms of looking at things like PCBs. And this was some early work that was done. The reference, hopefully you can see it at the bottom of the page. I can't, it's been cut off here. But this illustrates just the geographical, the spatial and temporal distribution of PCBs and harbour porpoises over the years of this paper. The highest levels were found in southwest England, and this is thought to be as a result of the last PCB producing plant being in the Bristol Channel. But there has been a gradual decline over time in the early years following the ban, but then that plateaued off, and there's still quite high levels of PCBs in harbour porpoises around our coasts. So moving on. And this is the work done by Paul Jepson, who was up until recently the veterinary pathologist for the Cetacean Strandings Investigation Programme, of which we are a part. And what he illustrated in his PhD thesis was the profound difference between porpoises dying from acute physical trauma and porpoises dying from infectious disease. And if you classify the porpoises dying from trauma as being healthy animals, which the majority are, we're talking predominantly about bycatch here, and compare that to porpoises with infectious disease, you can see that there are significant differences in the PCB levels between the two groups, suggesting a causal relationship between PCB levels and infectious disease. So moving on to the next slide. So turning to seals, why should we be concerned about seals? Well, they're top predators, and this is summarized very nicely in the paper that you can hopefully see in the reference at the bottom. They're top predators with a long lifespan, and have a high lipid content by virtue of the blubber layer that they have, which leads to large concentrations of POPs, that's persistent organic pollutants, of which PCBs are a part, are found in their tissues, and especially in the blubber layer. Seals are renowned for their irregular and potentially at times non-existent food intake at times of breeding, lactation and molting. And that leads to the release of POPs. They're mobilized from the blubber layer into the bloodstream at the same time as blubber is mobilized as an energy resource during those periods of non-feeding. And that exposes target organs in the body to increased concentrations of POPs at that time. And furthermore, seals, when they feed their young, produce a very, very fat-rich milk, which as a result contains a high level of POPs. And those are taken up by their suckling newborns, who are therefore exposed to large amounts of toxic chemicals in a critical development period of their life. So this sparked interest in SWME, to be honest. Sue, do you want to move on to the next slide? Thanks. Sue has already alluded to the fact that male seals in particular, but also other adult seals, are appearing to die in the prime of their life. And she very rightly thought it'd be a good idea to see if PCBs could be one of the reasons why this is happening. So through a very generous donation that came from the Devon Foundation, which was set up in honor of a young vet who died tragically very early in her life, some money came forward for use by the Seal Research Trust, and Sue very kindly put it forward to be used to analyse some PCB levels in the blubber of some adult male grey seals that we post-mortemed. And here, this is the data from the seals, and this just lists the identification number of the seal and then the primary findings of post-mortem, which you can see are relatively varied. And then on the right-hand side are the sum of the PCB levels found in these animals. So the samples were taken between 2019 and 2022. So if we look at the levels against the graph of known toxic thresholds, then we can see here that seal PCB levels are really quite concerning. The yellow line at the bottom is the lower toxic threshold that's known to cause physiological effects in marine mammal studies. The red line was the previously published highest toxic threshold known from marine mammals that have been published, which was seen with marked reproductive impairment of ring seals in the Baltic Sea. So you can see that at least 2 of our seals are above the highest toxic threshold level. One is right on the edge of it, and all but 1 are above the lower toxic threshold level. So really quite high levels of PCBs in these seals. And then if you put this data alongside some of the other cetacean species that are being measured, and this data, I should say, comes from a paper called "The PCB Pollution Continues to Impact Populations of Orcas and Other Dolphins in European Waters," which Paul Jepson and colleagues published in 2016 in PLOS ONE, and you can see it online. But you can see here that even though the seals are lower than some of the higher apex predators, such as bottlenose dolphins and killer whales, they still are pretty high compared to other animals. And certainly when you compare them to things like common dolphins and striped dolphins, their levels are quite significantly up there with them. So seals are suffering from high levels of PCBs, and this could be having an effect on both their immune systems and their reproductive systems. So even though we've only got a relatively small amount of data there from 7 seals, and it's quite widely spread in terms of the results we've had, it is certainly food for thought as to what PCBs could be doing. And certainly we need to be going on from here and looking at this in more detail. We need more data on adult male greys to try and increase the sample size and the veracity and the significance of the data. We need to be looking at adult females to see if they do, as we see in other cetacean species, have cetacean species have lower levels than their adult males because they're offloading to the pups. We need to be looking at pups to see if they're getting significant effects as a result of offloading. Are their levels quite high as a result of this? And then perhaps what we also ought to be doing is comparing, like Paul did, animals that we know have died of acute traumatic events in a relatively healthy state versus animals that we know have died from infectious disease, to see if we can illustrate that same potential causal relationship between PCB levels and disease. I'd just like to acknowledge all the people that have come together to help with this work. The Devon Foundation for providing the money, Sue and the Seal Research Trust for having the idea and the foresight to get this work done. CSIP and Rob at CSIP for helping with getting the analyses covered by CFAS. And then obviously British Divers and the Cornwall Wildlife Trust for help with getting hold of the carcasses so we can carry out the PMs. And most of all, the guys at the Cornwall Marine Pathology Team, my volunteers, who help so much with the work that we do. So thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you very much, James. So we'll move on to our next speaker now. We have Dan Jarvis, Director of Welfare and Conservation for British Divers Marine Life Rescue. And he'll be taking us through the BDMLR rescues and Cornwall Seal Hospital. Over to you, Dan.
Thanks, Helen. Just sharing my screen. Can you just tell me if it's come up?
Yeah, that looks good.
Okay, and can you hear me okay then?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Good to see so many of you joining us this evening for this webinar. If you've not come across BDMLR before, just to briefly introduce ourselves, we're a charity of trained volunteers, and they provide a frontline service for marine mammal response for animals that potentially might be in distress around the coastline of the UK. And tonight in this talk, I'm just going to take us through some of the calls that we've responded to in the Southwest in the last year through 2022, and a little bit about our seal hospital, which we've just been through our first and second seasons, if you're covering 2022 annually. So that means our first season was 2021 to 2022, and our second season is the one that we're just coming towards the end of right now. Anyway, our year started quite well for this entangled seal. On the 1st of January, it was spotted down at Pendeen. And we'd actually had a call about it the day before, but it had got back in the water before our volunteers arrived, unfortunately. But yeah, a good way to start the year. We managed to get to it and disentangle it on this occasion from a mass of monofilament, but also with this rope and also even a float attached to it as well. That animal was actually otherwise unharmed and in good condition, so it was able to be released straight away again without it having to come in for rehabilitation. And then a month later, just over a month later, we had this extremely lucky seal who was actually found by one of our volunteers who he lives near Plymouth and was actually in St Ives just for a few days on holiday and happened to be walking the coast path about a mile west of Porthmeor Beach, and just happened to look down and saw this seal amongst the rocks with a bit of net caught around it. So a team of us went down with him then, and we managed to catch and again release this seal back into the water, as luckily it didn't appear to have been entangled for long. But what was really incredible about this, and you probably can't see it very well in the bottom left photo because it's a blue-green net on a blue-green background. But yeah, this is a huge piece of net. You couldn't really see it from the cliff top looking down at this seal. It just looked like a relatively small section of net, but there was a huge mass of it bundled up in the rocks underneath. And it, when fully laid out, measures about just over 11 meters long. It's the biggest piece of net that we've ever removed off a live seal, certainly in the last 20 years that I've been involved. So yeah, so incredibly lucky seal. With that huge amount of net, it wouldn't have been going anywhere far very fast. It would have impeded its ability to feed and to dive, to haul out and rest properly. You know, it could get snagged on rocks, even underwater. So it was an incredibly lucky animal. And hopefully still out there doing well today. A couple of these cases have already been alluded to, but we had a couple of adult seals around Easter, or in the spring even. This one was at Portreath, an adult male who was in good nutritive state, but was very, very lethargic, practically unresponsive at Portreath. Which the Cornish Seal Sanctuary staff actually came out to deal with a couple of BDMLR volunteers. And this animal was put to sleep. And this was soon followed by this adult female just a little bit further up the coast at Lushington Cove at Porthtowan, who similarly wasn't doing too bad in terms of nutritional condition, but was relatively unresponsive on the beach. And again, attended to by our team and a vet, and euthanized on this occasion, and both have been off for a post-mortem with James. And as was mentioned earlier in Sue's talk, I think it was, there was a bit of suspicion that these could have been live bycatch animals that had survived being bycaught, but had not obviously done very well since then. So they were both quite interesting cases, especially given the short time span between the cases and the geographic area being quite localized as well. We rarely deal with adult animals. It's only 2 or 3 times a year that we potentially might see cases with adult seals. Most of the rest is young seal pups, of course. So yeah, these 2 cases were of particular interest because we've not really seen anything like this before. I'm sure many of you here remember SWME and the many adventures that she had been on. The oh, whoops, can you still hear? Yeah, sorry. So spearmint was what I'd probably term as a social solitary seal. She spent a lot of the last year up until about Easter adventuring around various parts of the southwest and being very approachable, allowing people to come up to her, regularly hauling out on busy beaches. People, of course, were taking advantage of that to get up close to pet and stroke her. They tried feeding her various things, from fish, which you'd expect, through to donuts, ice cream, sandwiches, all sorts of other things, which, of course, she had no interest in whatsoever, but they were just sort of being generally thrown in her general direction. And of course, from a management perspective, she was gathering large crowds around her on a regular basis, and a lot of volunteers put in a huge amount of time from several organisations, not just BDMLR, you know, the Rain Wildlife Group and Athena Wildlife Rescue as well, and others put a huge amount of time into monitoring, keeping people away, putting up signage and doing a lot of engagement, not just with the public, but also with the media and local authorities as well, just to try and manage this situation. But by Easter, unfortunately, Spearmint actually sort of made the situation untenable herself. She actually, on 2 occasions, came up on the Cornwall side over at Corsands, and actually came up into the road one night about 100 metres up the road outside a pub at night, and had to be herded back down the beach by volunteers, but then immediately started trying to climb over the barricades that had been made to stop her coming back up into the road. And then a week or so later, she did almost exactly the same thing again one morning and was crawling underneath a lorry that was parked outside a pub while it was doing its delivery at Kingsand. So because of those sorts of unfortunate incidents occurring and a lot of outcry again about her situation, she was taken in for rehabilitation with RSPCA West Hatch, and the bottom right photo shows her being released in a completely different and much more remote area of the country. And the good news is she hasn't returned to her old ways and her old behaviours. Her time in rehab and spending time with other seals again in that environment seems to have hopefully sort of weaned her off from her approachability by humans, which is only a good thing, of course, for her. So again, hopefully another seal that's still out there and doing very well for herself these days. We had this interesting case in June. It's actually the second time in 2 years that we've had a seal enter the dry dock at Falmouth when a ship has come in and has ended up being locked inside. And of course, after a few hours, all of the water is pumped back out and it's left completely dry in there. So for the second time in 2 years, a team of us, along with some of the staff at the dry dock at AMP in Falmouth, had to go down and herd this juvenile seal into a cage. And then, as you can see in the lower left photo, it was actually winched out by their crane, and we then drove it around to the seaward side of the dockyard and let the seal out. But this actually, interestingly, was a tagged seal. It had previously been rehabilitated a couple of years beforehand by the Cornish Seal Sanctuary. So it's nice to see the seal again, but not quite the right circumstances. He was otherwise doing okay. And again, hopefully continues to do so now and knows better than to follow ships into dry docks. As we got into the new pupping season, as we moved into autumn, we had a really tremendous effort by volunteer medics down in the far west of Cornwall in Penwith. We had a seal mum give birth to her pup on a very, very well-known public beach, a beauty spot, which, even though it is somewhat remote, is subject to a huge amount of visitors specifically going down onto that beach. And the mum had even given birth right by one single access point to this beach. So with the blessing of the beach owner, thankfully, we were able to put up a sign that you can see in the bottom right photo. And we had volunteers there pretty much every single day for most of the daylight hours. stopping people from going down on the beach and separating the mum and the pup due to repeated disturbances or, you know, potential handling of the pup if mum wasn't around. And it worked incredibly well. The vast majority of people coming down or coming past, they were actually just really interested to hear about the seal and to watch their natural behaviours, and they were quite happy to not go down on the beach. There was only a handful of cases where dogs off leads needed to be stopped from going down there, and again, just a very small minority of people who were very upset that they couldn't go onto the beach or were being asked not to go down onto the beach. But after 3 weeks of this, keeping the mum and the pup together, you can see the photo, the main photos near the start, and then the photo at the top right is after the pup had actually fully molted, mum had left, and we've got this seal's fur pattern. So like Sue mentioned earlier, this is hopefully one that we might be able to track through later in life if it comes back to here. And yeah, just really fantastic effort that we managed to keep these two together. Otherwise, you know, the pup might not have survived. It might have ended up needing to be rescued to come in for rehabilitation, which, you know, that's really a last resort option. The ideal situation is, of course, to keep these animals together and in the wild. We had another adult seal in October up in North Cornwall as well. This was quite an interesting case. He was quite an elderly animal and very emaciated as well. He was very, very underweight and largely unresponsive, unfortunately, as well. So he was attended to by our team, and again, a vet, given a full assessment. He put up absolutely no resistance whatsoever to being caught. And he was then put to sleep on that basis to relieve his suffering, as he was clearly sort of on his last legs or last flippers, I suppose. But what we did find was in the lower left photo, this tag, which actually I've never seen this tag type before, so I got quite excited about it. And it still gave interesting information, but it was a little, I've got to admit to a slight amount of disappointment. As I thought it was a really, really old tag, but it didn't turn out to be that old. It actually turned out this animal had been tagged by the Sea Mammal Research Unit on Ramsey Island in Wales back in 2019. And back then he weighed 139 kilos. And by the time he came up here, sort of 3 years later, he'd lost 40 to 50 kilos, somewhere in that range. You know, clearly not doing very well anymore. But yeah, still really interesting all the same that we got the information back on where he'd been tagged and where, which was good to know. You know, it's all really part of that bigger picture, like Sue's mentioned earlier, of connecting lots of different places. These seals have their own individual visit patterns. You know, it's all really interesting and useful data to have this kind of information available to us, even when it ends up in cases like this. Going back to our pup season pups, this was another tagged seal, this time from RSPCA West Hatch. It had been originally rescued in 2020 in Croyd in North Devon, and had gone straight to RSPCA West Hatch for rehabilitation, and had been released again in North Devon in early 2021. But in mid-November last year, this seal unfortunately turned up in St Ives, entangled in all of these hooks, which are embedded in her mouth, her body, her rear flippers as well. And so she therefore came into our BDMLR seal hospital and later went on back to RSPCA West Hatch, but sadly she didn't survive. But we don't think it was related to the hooks. I don't actually have post-mortem examination information on this seal, so I don't know what the actual cause was, but she was actually already in a relatively debilitated state, really emaciated, very lethargic while she was with us at the BDMLR hospital. So it does rather seem that there was something else going on prior to being entangled in these hooks. But unfortunately, whatever it was, she never recovered from. We're finishing up nearly. We can't really leave out the walrus, the latest walrus now, and I'm probably stretching the boundaries of the southwest, but this was Southampton in December when Thor, who had been travelling up and down from the Netherlands as far as Brittany in northwest France and then back again, paid his first visit to the UK. And I'm sure many of you saw his story in the media. He later went on over sort of Christmas, New Year up to Scarborough and to Northumberland. And just a couple of weeks ago, he was identified back up in Iceland, which is really exciting to know that he's made it all the way back up there, just like Wally from 2020 when he did his visit down past us here in the southwest. And then we're going to end the year at New Year's Eve. I've just thrown this one in because it's one of those weird coincidence type calls that we had. So this seal was reported to us on Porthmeor Beach in St Ives at around about 10 p.m. Myself and my mum and dad, actually, who were both volunteers as well, we actually went out to check on this seal. Turned out to be okay, so we let it go. And we managed to get home just before midnight, before it turned to 2023. But the weird coincidency stuff happened 2 years ago, where at about 10 o'clock on the 31st of December, we had a call about a seal on Porthmeor Beach, which both my parents and myself, again, went over to check. Turned out to be fine. It was let go, but on that occasion, we got back in the new year. What makes it an even weirder coincidence is that both of these seals were reported by the same person 2 years apart. It was really quite incredible, you know, but nice to end the year with a seal that didn't need to come in for rehab, as it has been a pretty busy time for us. So this is where we move on now to our activities at the BDMLR Cornwall Seal Hospital. And these are the number of pups that we've had in ever since we started doing temporary holding ourselves. We've had the BDMLR hospital, as mentioned earlier, for the last 2 years. And you can see that numbers have been relatively sort of on the incline, but we've got a couple of blips in the bad storm years in particular, where we've had significantly more. But you can see this graph's actually already out of date, even though it was produced last week. We're actually on 103 seals now for this current season, which doesn't seem to want to end just yet. We're still getting seals in most weeks. But rather excitingly, Natalie, who is our vet who manages the Seal Hospital and leads our veterinary team in BDMLR, for the first time, completely within our own organisation, we carried out 2 operations on seals this winter. The first one on the left was a digit amputation on the rear right flipper for a broken bone. And the one on the right is a digit amputation on the front right flipper on this occasion. And both of those seals went through rehabilitation and are now back out in the wild. And I also wanted to mention this one as well. This was actually a really special seal, and I'm sure Gareth, if you're still on the call, you'll recognise this one immediately. This was a seal actually rescued near Swansea in South Wales, and it did come all the way down to us here in Cornwall for rehab, as the RSPCA were out of action at the time. And this seal unfortunately had quite a severe infection in the rear left flipper, which after we passed this seal on to the Cornish Seal Sanctuary, eventually underwent a full amputation of the rear left flipper. This seal has actually been released out to the wild and has been seen back in the wild since then, which is really, really exciting, because these particular cases, you really want to have that kind of feedback that they're surviving back out in the wild. And the answer for this one so far is yes, it is. So that's really fantastic feedback for us as rescuers and rehabilitators to have that. We, of course, don't do this alone. Aside from everyone else that I've mentioned, there's a lot of other organisations we work with. So thank you to them for all of their support. And that's it from me.
Great, thank you so much, Dan. That brings us to our very last talk. So we're going full circle back to Sue. who's going to talk to us about climate change.
Okay, can you hear me and see that, please, Helen?
Yeah, all good.
Lovely. Okay, so you might have seen this slide before, although I have updated it. Our long-term data from all our fabulous citizen scientists shows that the peak number for seals at West Cornwall has shifted, and it shifted forward. It used to be between 2004 and 2014, March and April, and now it has more recently been December and January. So we have a big shift in terms of phenology and seasonality of our seals. The mackerel fishery has moved later in St Ives Bay and has gone from the summer to starting in November. So as a result of that, we now have an overlap temporally and spatially between the mackerel fishery and seals, and that's been causing issues in terms of entanglement, particularly hooked in the mackerel lines. The long-term data also shows that pupping is now earlier than it was and is now shorter, and we've also been getting really strange haul-out change behaviour. We've had haul-out extensions through the summer, we've had haul-out shifts from one side of a headland to another, and we've actually had complete beaches that have never been used before suddenly starting to be used. So things are changing in the marine environment, and clearly one of the potential drivers for that is climate change. If you haven't seen them, I highly recommend the Cornwall Climate Care films that have been made specifically for Cornwall on this issue. We featured in the Under the Surface one, which was the first of their documentaries, but there have been 4 more. The latest one is all about farming and climate change. If you haven't seen them, they're like a one-stop shop, half an hour, one-stop shop on each of these topics about climate change. So they're a really quick way to learn a lot of really useful stuff. But what we discovered in 2022 is that climate change is also adding to disturbance for seals, which was a big shock. So the graph at the top shows an orange line, which shows the number of seals hauling out on a particular beach in North Cornwall in 2022. You can see that between March and June, there were very few seals there, whereas we would normally expect high numbers of seals on that beach. And the reason there were no seals between May and June was because March and June was because in March, this massive rockfall happened and presumably spooked all the seals off the beach and stopped them using that habitat for that 3-month period. So that was really interesting, although worrying, because hundreds of seals use that beach. And if they've all been displaced for 3 months, that's a huge energy cost potentially for them seeking other shelters, or maybe not finding, or maybe finding appropriate habitat. At West Cornwall, we've been tracking rockfalls over the last few years, and in 2019 there was 1, 2020 there was 1, 2021 we had 4, and in 2022 we had 8. And after some of the rockfalls, you could clearly see straight line stampedes right down to the sea where seals had been disturbed as a result of the rockfalls. I was out on a survey, I think this was October, and I got absolutely soaked right through because there was a huge heavy downpour, one of our extreme weather events that we're getting now more frequently because potentially of climate change. And when I went to shelter under the wall, the seals were still on the beach. When I came back, half the seals had gone. And I put up with the next rainstorm when it came just to see what the seals did. And exactly the same thing happened. So over 2 very short, sharp rainstorms, 37 of the 70 seals stampeded into the sea and were disturbed by the rain. And then in November, we had a massive hailstorm, the worst one I've ever been in personally. And we had a photo, admittedly the after photo has got water all over the lens, and I couldn't even film because I couldn't hold the camera up and have my face in the hail. It was that painful. The left photo with the dots on it shows what the haul out looked like before, and 7 minutes later after the hailstorm, and you can see the hail on the side of the beach in the top right photo, this is what the beach looked like. We had 272 seals seriously disturbed in that 7-minute period down to that hailstorm. So we've now got climate change adding to disturbance in 3 different ways. Why does it affect them? Well, I'm thinking their muzzles are super sensitive. They've got the most sensitive whiskers of most mammals. Every whisker's got 1,500 nerve endings, more sensitive than our palms of our hands. If it hurts our hands and our face, it's going to hurt theirs. So presumably it's not pleasant for them. So we decided we would make a film about climate change and seals with 5 actions that we want people to do, summarised by teams, to do with transport, energy, eating, money and sharing stories. So this is us being filmed We thankfully had Karen's kitchen, because mine wouldn't look anywhere near as nice as that, and Mark's workshop, which was really fantastic, so thanks to them. And then George and Polly did some filming with me out on the coast. And what I want to do is I want to share that film. We're going to launch it tonight in this presentation. It's a 4-minute film, and I'd like you to see it just before we finish. If you want to see the high-res version, because it'll play badly, won't it, over Zoom? But if you want to see the high-res version and you want to see it playing properly, or you want to share it, the YouTube link is there, and I'm sure we'll share that in the chat before we finish. Okay. Helen, if the audio is a bit quiet or anything's problematic with you with it, please will you tell me? Thanks.
I will, yeah.
Charismatic, individually unique and playful. Beyond amazing, seals are sentinels that bring stories about the state of our
Oh, I'm sorry, that was me.
To us on land. They're already feeling firsthand the impacts of climate change. Seals are crucial to healthy seas and of course therefore to us. As top predators, they help to manage and keep ecosystems in balance. We're so lucky. The UK have over 30% of the world's population of grey seals and around 1/3 of the European population of harbour seals. The wild Atlantic Ocean is their home. Climate change is already happening and we need to take action now. We need to preserve a healthy, livable planet for future generations to enjoy. Seals are already experiencing firsthand the impacts of climate change, and in some shocking ways. Extreme weather has washed pups off beaches, and after Storm Arwen, 846 pups were washed off in a single night off a beach, all separated from their mothers and therefore doomed. Storm Ophelia and Brian in 2017 in the southwest washed pups away from their mothers and had an impact the following year when we had 1/3 less pups born as a result of the complications from pups being separated from their mothers. Extreme weather events such as hammering rain and hailstorms are adding to already high levels of human disturbance of seals. For example, in a single hailstorm over 7 minutes, 272 seals stampeded into the sea. That's the biggest disturbance incident we have on record. Seals are already disturbed by us 68% of the time when we're present, so this is really serious. Extreme weather is also affecting groundswells, and groundswells rip up fishing gear that's been left.
Terribly sorry, that's me again.
And that increases entanglement rates. We already have the second highest rate of entanglement anywhere in the world for a spotted seal species. Flooding is also having an impact, washing sediments off the land into the sea. Sediments make the water murky, which means that seals can't see prey, nor can they feel it. And this is most felt by young seals that have just left their mothers and are now having to teach themselves to feed. It adds to their challenges. Warming seas are also affecting the seasonality of seals. We used to have peak season in April and March. Now it's December or January. That's a massive shift in a very short period of time. We're also seeing peak pupping season move earlier in the year, and the pupping season has also moved shorter. A further impact of climate change is acidifying the oceans. This is changing prey species, but it's also resulting in toxic algal blooms that produce domoic acid, and unfortunately this ruins seal neurology and their nerve systems. More seals are basically getting into trouble than ever before, particularly young seals. So they need us to manage ourselves. They need people management, but they also need rescue, rehab and release. This is all going to increase over the next 8 to 10 years. So we all have a role to play. What can we do? So now you know that time is running out, but it's not too late. That's the good news. But we all need to change and reduce our carbon footprints, and there are lots of ways we can do this. Firstly, and most importantly, energy. We need to insulate our homes, wear more clothes, turn the heating thermostat down, use LED lights, Have efficient applications, washing machines, dishwashers, and ideally use a cool wash every time you use the washing. Renewable energy sources are key. Travel is another way we can make things different. We can walk more, use bikes, public transport and carpool wherever we can. Electric vehicles are going to be important, but basically we all need to fly less as well. With food, it's important to eat more plants, less meat and less fish and less dairy. We need to make sure that we have fewer items wasted of food, and any food waste needs to be composted. We need to reduce, reuse, redesign, repurpose for all sorts of things rather than renewing them. And it's very important, if you have money to invest, that you invest in ethical companies who have a good track record for looking after the planet. So now you know that action is vital. You need to use less, localise your life, make your money count and spread the word and tell everyone who'll listen. I know it's hard to connect the dots, but reducing your carbon footprint will definitely help our UK speciality seals. But let's not miss the point here. It's not about helping seals or the sea. This is about helping ourselves. Ensure your young loved ones actually have a chance of a good life on a livable planet. Start now, take action, make a difference, one step at a time.
Okay, so we're not going to have time for questions, I don't think, are we? I would like to dedicate the talk tonight to my mum who's just passed away. But if you have questions, we're happy to answer them. I'll leave it up to Helen to decide whether we've got time or not.
Hi, Sue, and everyone. Yeah, it's up to you if there's some questions coming in, perhaps just some quick ones. Otherwise, we can do any questions by email as well. I'll pop the Exeter Marine email in the chat, and any questions can be directed there and I can distribute them, or if there's any quick questions, we can do them now as well.
I'm just going to put the link to that video if you want to watch it again on YouTube, or if you want to share it, I've just put it in the chat as well. And thank you, Helen, for putting your email in there. That's great. Thank you. Should we wrap it up there then, Helen?
I think so, yeah. Let's let you get off. But thank you very much to all of our speakers tonight, and everyone for attending. This will be uploaded to the Southwest Marine Ecosystems YouTube channel if you've missed any of it. But yeah, hope everybody has a lovely evening, and thank you again to all of our speakers.
Thank you for hosting it as well, Helen, and thank you to the university for supporting this Southwest Marine Ecosystems. It's fantastic. We do appreciate it.
Thanks, Sue.